criminal courtroom where began the largest mass murder trial in this nation's history.
The murder trial of John Gacy did indeed get underway today with opening statements from the prosecution and the defense.
Well, my feelings, I'd like to see them, do something to him besides put him in a, institution. I'd like to see him be killed if I get my feelings to say.
Egan described Gacy as rational, premeditated, and evil, who killed his victims like flies when they got in his way. Carefully planned murders that resulted in bodies and bodies and bodies, day after day after day.
On March 17, 1942, John Wayne Gacy was born at St. Anne Hospital in Chicago, Illinois, to his father, John Stanley Gacy, and mother, Marion Elaine Robinson, as the second child and only son of 3 children throughout childhood due to a heart murmur that produced abnormal sounds during heartbeats. He required checkups and faced activity limits. In 1953, when he turned 11, after a playground head injury, he suffered headaches and fainting spells, and these recurring health issues through his teens affected his school life. His father, John Stanley Gacy, was a World War I veteran and auto mechanic, suffering from severe alcoholism. He repeatedly criticized his son's sickly state and subjected him to domestic abuse. According to Gacy's recollections, his father swung belts and tools whenever Gacy struggled with tools or said he was sick, with his father repeating abuse while drunk. Family members testified tension filled the home. His mother, Marion Robinson, tried to stop it, but his father demeaned him as sissy and shoved him into the basement corner, though no official records were filed with Cook County courts or police at the time. Relatives and neighbors testified that his father's violent behavior continued in the home. This environment later came to be seen as a key clue explaining his dual behavior, such as why he became so obsessed with a good reputation among neighbors and his outward appearance.
One thing John Wayne Gacy could not plan was the way he got that way.
My dad was domineering in fact. He had a different set of values, but also very stern individual. My dad drank a lot. When he drank a lot, he was abusive to my mother and to me, but I never swung at my dad because I loved him for what he stood for.
After graduating high school in 1962, Gacy enrolled in Northwestern Business College and completed basic business and accounting courses. Right after graduating in 1963, he got a job at a Chicago funeral home, driving hearse carriages and assisting body retrieval to start his work life without reluctance toward handling bodies. He took night shifts and emergency calls and processed funeral paperwork quickly, earning his employer's trust. Later moving to a shoe manufacturer sales job, he visited Midwest dealerships to promote new lines. Even driving hundreds of kilometers a day, he remembered family events of store owners, standing out with great sales skills and tact. In his company's quarterly evaluation then, as an employee with good people skills meeting sales goals, he was recognized enough to be recorded, and the experience he built dealing with people then is cited as a factor linked to building his trusted image in the community later on. On September 5, 1964, he married Marlene Myers, whom he met through a co-worker. His father-in-law, Fred Myers, in Waterloo, Iowa, was a wealthy man owning multiple real estate and franchise stores. Noticing his son-in-law's diligence and skill, entrusted Gacy with the overall management of 3 KFC stores he owned in downtown Waterloo. In the mid-1960s, the American Midwest was a time when the post-World War II baby boom generation growing up coincided with a booming dining industry, turning franchise stores into new community spending hubs. Becoming a store manager, Gacy kept a cot inside the store and worked there past midnight, managing the chicken supply chain and inspecting recipe standards and store cleanliness daily. The 3 stores he managed achieved high sales in the area. As store management stabilized, Gacy solidified his standing in the Waterloo, Iowa community. In 1965, he joined the Waterloo Junior Chamber, a young leaders organization, and took charge of planning local events, youth sports, and charity bazaars. By taking charge of demanding field operations, Gacy earned his peers' recognition, and 2 years after joining in 1967, he became vice president of the Waterloo JCs, the Waterloo Courier, a local newspaper. In a special feature on young entrepreneurs contributing to local development, highlighted Gacy's activities. Colleagues at the time remembered him as diligent, staying late to clean and help members with personal matters. In early 1967, amid high public trust, Gacy's first recorded sexual assault occurred while his wife and children were visiting her family. Gacy lured one of his store's teenage male employees to his empty home after work. Using his position as an employer, he brought the victim into a room and committed a sexual offense. He gave him hush money afterward, but the victim told his parents, and upon receiving the report, Waterloo police searched Gacy's home and found items matching the statement. Following this incident, Gacy was formally indicted, and his image as a young entrepreneur suffered its first crack on December 3, 1968, at a trial held based on the victim's courtroom testimony and physical evidence secured by the police. The Iowa court found Gacy guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison. He was incarcerated at the Anamosa State Penitentiary in Iowa. Right after the conviction, his wife Mays filed for divorce, secured custody of their 2 children, and after settling the property division, left Iowa with the children. The franchise management rights built up in the Waterloo area, his reputation in the community, and his family collapsed in an instant, and his name appeared in the local newspaper after reports of the criminal verdict. Imprisoned at the Anamosa State Penitentiary, Gacy volunteered for prison labor in the laundry room and kitchen food service. According to prison administrative records, he did not violate the rules even once during his imprisonment, and no records of conflicts with other inmates remained. Joining the Inmate Activity Club, an inmate gathering inside the prison, Gacy helped prepare cultural events in the prison and faithfully followed the guards' instructions. In interview records, the officers in charge noted that Gacy reflected on his crime and evaluated his prison conduct as excellent, and based on this, the Prison Parole Board classified him as eligible for parole. On June 18, 1970, Gacy served 18 months of his 10-year statutory sentence and was released on parole as a model prisoner. He immediately left Iowa and returned to Chicago, Illinois, where his mother Marion lived. At the time, in the early 1970s in America, there was no computer network to check criminal records or imprisonment histories from other states in real time, and criminal records were also kept on paper, structured so that they were delivered by mail only upon request. As a result, Gacy's juvenile sex offense record and imprisonment history were virtually unshared with the Chicago police jurisdiction or the community, allowing him to start life in a new community without his past being exposed. On March 24, 1971, Gacy, who settled in Chicago, established PDM Contracting, a home remodeling and construction company, with his mother's support. He worked diligently on houses in the Norwood Park area, handling old plumbing repairs, painting, and roof repair construction, fixing minor home defects for residents for free, or generously discounting costs, earning praise, hiring local high school students, and troubled youth as site laborers, regularly paying high cash wages than going rates. Residents and parents regarded Gacy as a diligent contractor who provided jobs to youth and young people looking for work, and residents naturally gathered around him. From mid-1971, Gacy actively participated in community charity work and volunteer organizations. He prepared his own makeup and costumes and began working as a clown character named Pogo, visiting local democratic events and children's birthday parties dressed as a clown. He showcased balloon art and magic performances, building a friendly image.
He was a Kentucky colonel and a husband and a father of 5 children, and an actor dressed as a clown. John Gacy loves clowns.
To me, clowning was a way of relaxation for me. You regressed into childhood, you were able to relax, and you could be goofy if you wanted to, and still you had the facade of your face being covered.
Even today, on death row, he's painting portraits of himself as a clown.
I used to do clowning, and I don't know if you want to mention the name, for an ice cream company in Chicago who had 33 flavors. I'm serious, Bressler Ice Cream Company. I was their contractor, and I was also their clown.
As his construction business stabilized on November 1, 1971, Gacy purchased a single-story detached house located at 8213 W. Summerdale Ave, Norwood Park, Cook County, Illinois. While inspecting the wooden house in a typical neighborhood, Gacy found a narrow, damp crawl space about a meter high, located right beneath the floor. He confirmed that the square wooden door in the master bedroom closet floor was the sole entrance to the hidden underground space, then added a lock and covered it with a heavy wardrobe and items, blocking outsiders' access and view. Outwardly an ordinary house with green lawns and a garden, the sealed underground space under the master bedroom closet would later become the site where dozens of victims' remains were discovered in heaps. On January 3, 1972, Gacy lured a boy he met at the Chicago Greyhound bus terminal, Timothy McCoy, to his new home, murdering him first and secretly burying him beneath the house. As his first crime went unnoticed, Gacy subsequently began using his home in earnest for crimes. As confirmed in surviving victims' court testimonies and investigative records, his modus operandi began repeating in a fixed sequence. He would roll victims into his house or vehicle, talk with them in the living room to lower their guard, offer to show a handcuff trick binding both hands at once, have them extend their wrists to be cuffed, and subdue their bodies. Soon after, Gacy revealed his true colors, using the garrote method as his primary weapon. And most serial murders between 1975 and 1978 would follow this exact sequence.
Shoelaces, huh? You're in trouble now. Right. Aren't you afraid sitting that close to me? What the hell? Oh, this is too long. You don't need it this long. Okay, I had a rosary, which I carried in my pocket. I've always carried a rosary. It was my communion rosary. They said, well, what kind of a knot do you use? I said, what do you mean knot? When I tie things up, I says, depending on what I'm using it for, I said, the only thing I ever learned was from Boy Scouts is a tourniquet knot. He said, well, show us what that is. So I took, at that time, and again, it's together, but in order to demonstrate it here, I took the rosary and I said, well, here, you put it around. It's hard trying to do this. Why don't you put your hand out? Okay, here. What I told him, I says, here, all you do is you wrap it around, you put one knot in it. And I said, then you put a second knot in it, okay? I says, then you take a stick and stick it in here and you just turn this. And I says, it causes a tourniquet. I said, that's the only knot I ever learned.
Precisely the kind of knot found on the ropes.
As Gacy's modus operandi took root around 1975, missing person reports of young men around Chicago began to pile up one by one. Initially, runaway boys met near bus terminals became targets of his crimes. Later, Gacy used his construction company, PDM Contracting, to gradually incorporate its equipment and environment into his crimes, and company trucks became a trusted tool to transport victims without suspicion. Gacy approached construction job seekers and day labor youths, offering high daily wages in cash on the spot, and this method expanded his pool of targets beyond regular workers to include friends and acquaintances who visited the site at their recommendation. According to some survivors, it was also confirmed that he flashed a fake police badge to impersonate authority and force them into vehicles, though this was not the primary method. John Buckovich, a former employee of PDM Contracting, visited Gacy's home in 1975 to settle unpaid wages, and has been missing ever since.
What happened to, what happened in the Bukovic case?
I don't want to go into the other, the five that I know about. Just take it that I did. Bukovich is not one that I killed, so I don't know nothing about him. The little bit that I know about him is that he was an employee of mine. See, when you look about this recall business, and
I'm not a prosecutor, John, but you just...
I know you're not.
Bukovic
Wait a minute.
...is not one that you killed, which suggests that maybe, in fact, there were others that you did kill. And I'm not...
Okay, I'm sorry if I led you to believe... No, strike it then. That is wrong.
But it's too late to strike it. There are others he killed. Children he lured into his home anyway who didn't get out alive.
From April the following year, 1976, until before summer, Darrell Sampson left home to find a job and disappeared, and Randall Reffitt and Samuel Stapleton vanished simultaneously while out. Then Michael Bonin, William Carroll, and Rick Johnston also failed to return home after finishing their errands, and Michael Marino and Kenneth Parker went missing together downtown. New disappearances kept piling up. William Bundy, seeking construction work, vanished without a trace. Jimmy Hawkinson, searching for a new home after moving from Minnesota, and Robert Gilroy, returning home late at night, also disappeared. Following that, John Scheich, who contacted Gacy over a car sale, Gregory Goldzik, who worked at PDM Contracting, and Francis Alexander, who had settled in Chicago to find work, vanished one by one through the points of contact in Gacy's business and relationships. By 1977 and 1978, disappearances repeated at a faster rate than before. Matthew Bowman and Robert Winch, who went out looking for jobs, and John Prestige, heading to a meeting place, were reported missing, and John Murray and Russell Nelson, traveling downtown, also vanished. Then David Tausmer, Tommy Bowling, William Kindred, and James Mazzara. As the disappearances of young men increased, bodies piled up in the basement of the house on Summerdale Avenue. Dozens vanished over 3 years, but no connections were found between the cases, and Gacy continued his crimes under the trust of the community. While continuing his crimes, Gacy, within the community, further expanded his influence. Around 1975, as Pogo the Clown, he participated in hospitals and local events, and at the same time began to show up in local political activities. He voluntarily visited neighborhood events, children's charities, the Norwood Park Local Parade, and neighbors' children's birthday parties, attending charity events and local parties on his own initiative. He showed balloon art and magic performances to the children, and neighbors accepted him as a kind and ordinary neighbor, continuing while running PDM Contracting. Free home repair activities for residents within the community became a factor in building his reputation. In addition, acting as a Democratic precinct committeeman, he supported the local party organizations, election activities, and participating in political events and fundraising. He built close ties with influential political figures. He also invited local police officers to his home, had regular drinking sessions to build relationships, and these connections allowed Gacy to remain a trusted figure in the community, acting as the background that kept his crimes hidden for a long time. Consequently, neighbors who joined his charity and political work remembered him fondly as a community-minded entertainer for children. On April 13, 1976, the Chicago Democratic Carter campaign event venue was the peak of Gacy's social activities. At the event, following the presidential election victory, shook hands with Rosalind Carter, wife of Jimmy Carter, who would become the 39th U.S. president, and took a commemorative photo. This photo later served as a symbolic record of how Gacy was accepted as a person in the community throughout his crimes.
And Pogo the Clown was the clowning that I did for charity hospital work for the Democratic Party and that. And Pogo the Clown is originally.
A visit with Rosalind Carter, the First Lady during the Carter administration. Gacy right here is hiding the fact that there are bodies buried under his house.
I always felt that service community and community service to others, in my religious background, I felt if you serve other people, it'll come back to serve you. I've always believed that way with generosity.
Even as the disappearances of young men accumulated, law enforcement agencies did not move because information was not shared among police jurisdictions across Chicago. Missing persons reports received sporadically failed to connect into a single serial case, as most victims were runaway youths or day laborers. The cases were dismissed as runaways and left in files. This investigative flaw was starkly exposed in the disappearance case of PD and contracting employee John Butkovich. When his son went to Gacy's house to collect his wages and did not return, his father pointed to Gacy as the culprit and strongly urged the Des Plaines Police Department to investigate. However, the police at the time, symbolized even by a commemorative photo with First Lady Rosalind Carter, could hardly doubt his social reputation, and as a result of accepting Gacy's explanation as it was, the initial investigation was closed as is without investigating Gacy. While missing persons continued to pile up endlessly like this, the narrow and damp burial space beneath the Summerdale Avenue home became increasingly filled with bodies so that no more could be buried. Gacy personally crawled beneath the crawl space, digging out even the gaps between the heating pipes, and forcibly expanded the burial space, with the pit growing shallower. And pipe heat constantly applied, remains decayed rapidly. And starting around 1977, the stench of decay rose through vents and pipes to fill the whole house. Gacy explained away the odor as plumbing or sewage issues, deflecting suspicion from those around him, and to reduce the putrid gas and stench, he spread massive amounts of lime every night across the basement floor where bodies were buried. However, even the last remaining space beneath the basement becoming packed tight with piles of bodies and lime, leaving no room to bury even a single more corpse. Gacy, starting from March 15, 1978, changed the burial method he had long maintained. From then on, Gacy put victims' bodies in his trunk and dumped them into the river late at night from the Des Plaines River Bridge. On December 11, 1978, at a pharmacy in Des Plaines, Illinois, 15-year-old Robert Peast, working part-time, told family and co-workers he was going to meet a contractor who offered him a new job and left, only to disappear without a trace. Securing the pharmacy's work logs and witness statements, Des Plaines Police Department investigators, while tracing Peast's whereabouts that day to finalize a remodeling contract for the pharmacy right before his disappearance, discovered that the contractor who stayed there was none other than Gacy the very next day, December 12, and abruptly summoned him to the police station as a reference witness. While previous disappearances of runaway youths or ruthless day laborers were dismissed as simple runaways, leading to scattered investigations, the investigation into ordinary student Robert Peast, who had clear ties and a job, began to focus squarely on Gacy. Confirming Gacy's past sex crime record, Des Plaines police obtained a search warrant and entered the Sunnydale Avenue home on December 13, 1978, conducting an initial investigation.
See, there's a misconception of what the house on Summerdale is. It's not a house where you work 9 to 5 and come home, and it's like a house where you live in. The living room was the private office section. One of the bedrooms was a terrarium. The kitchen was more like a fast food kitchen.
He's painting a picture of a busy place, but conveniently omitting the crawl space, which he divided into plots like a cemetery, numbers 1 through 26, 6 feet by about 3 feet, and 1.5 feet deep. That was under the house.
During the investigation, the investigators detected an intense foul odor emanating from the floor vents whenever the heater turned on, which was a sign that the underground burial site Gacy had covered with lime had reached full capacity.
When I was arrested, they claimed, well, there was a putrefied odor in the house. And I contend that was a lot of hogwash too, because one officer, Schultz, claims on the 18th or on the 19th that as he came into the house, we had come into the house and my little Lhasa Apso was in the house. And of course he had been locked in the kitchen, all day. Well, a little puppy, he piddled. And while he's piddling and while he is doing his business on the paper and that, you can imagine what it smells like if you go into a closed room. And when the heat came on, as soon as the heat came on, it'd give you, that strong feces odor. I found it as odd when we bought the house that a house with a crawl space would need a sump pump. But then I learned the first time it rained that this ground gets wet under there and the crawl space actually floods up to a foot deep in water. And then as it recedes, it puts out a musty odor. There was always a musty odor in that house.
During the interrogation the next day, December 14, Gacy denied having seen the missing boy, denying the charges. But that same day, detectives searched the trash can in front of his house and found a clothing receipt and belongings of the missing Peast, proving Gacy's statement to be false. With Gacy's past criminal record unknown to police, the foul odor discovered in his home's basement, and even Peast's items secured, police regarded Gacy as a prime suspect and intensified the investigation by applying for a second search warrant, during which process reports from survivors scattered across multiple police stations came to the surface, re-examined along with existing evidence in records the police found at the time from a worker at Gacy's KFC in spring 1967, Donald Voorhees, who reported his assault, confirming Gacy's first sex crime. Robert Donnelly, who sought a job on Jan 26, 1977, was lured to Gacy's house and tortured, but escaped and reported it. Jeffrey Rinnell, abducted in Chicago on March 21, 1978, who suffered drugging, confinement, and torture, but survived, then tracked Gacy down and reported him, and after being hired by PDM contracting on May 13 of the same year, who faced multiple death threats at Gacy's house. The statement of David Cram was also subject to review. Common victim accounts of the lowering, binding, and house layout matched, leading investigators to cross-reference fragmented testimonies with the Robert Peace disappearance. Convinced that Gacy was a serial killer, repeating the same crime for years, they took action. With a 24-hour surveillance warrant approved, investigators deployed 2 vehicles starting Deck 18, tracking Gacy's every move and cutting off escape routes. The next day, Gacy drove recklessly through Chicago streets to lose detectives, then suddenly pulled over, inviting them to dinners at diners or offering drinks at his house. Showing unusual behavior changes, he began losing composure as the net kept closing in. A pressured Gacy visited a Chicago law office on Deck 20 and began speaking about his involved cases. The next day, with arrest and second search warrants issued, police entered the house. Wearing gas masks, investigators crawled into the narrow crawl space underneath and dug through dirt mixed with lime powder, unearthing a human femur in the shallow ground. And during further excavation, multiple unrecognizable remains were exposed one after another. 1 secret burial traces were found in the basement. Murder charges were effectively confirmed, and Gacy, watching the excavation, was arrested on site. Jailed in Cook County Jail right after, Gacy, on Deck 22, confessed to his lawyer that in the crawl space below, he had buried the remains of multiple victims. Later, during police interrogation, the crime scale and disposal methods were detailed, and Gacy stated he killed over 30 young men. He also stated that later, running out of space, he dumped some bodies in the Des Plaines River, finally revealing the truth behind years of serial disappearances. With Gacy's confession secured, forensic experts and a team entered on Deck 28 to excavate his house and nearby dump sites. Using tools and special equipment, they dug up the floor under the house, recovering 26 bodies from the crawl space and 3 more on the property grounds, uncovering 29 remains within the property. The investigation team then searched the Des Plaines River area mentioned by Gacy, Timothy O'Rourke, Frank Landingin, James Massara, and Robert Peast, recovering 4 additional bodies, bringing the total count of victims identified from his home and the river to 33. Known as a trusted figure in the community, Gacy's hidden reality and his years of serial murders were exposed together. The investigation dominated the media and shocked American society.
Gacy, a building contractor, was arrested in December 1978 in connection with the disappearance of a 15-year-old boy. Later that month, police began uncovering bodies from a crawl space under Gacy's suburban Chicago home. 29 bodies were eventually found on Gacy's property, 4 others found in a nearby river. Gacy had confessed to the killings, but his lawyers claimed he was insane. Gacy said he has 4 personalities.
Most remains moved to the Cook County Examiner's office, suffered heat from pipes, long-term burial decay, and damage during excavation, making identification difficult. 1970s forensics had limits in DNA identification, so some victims remained unnamed, classified under unidentified victim numbers, prolonging the identification process. Following court demolition approval next April, the crime scene house on Summerdale Avenue was demolished using heavy machinery. On February 6, 1980, at trial in the Chicago Criminal Court, Illinois, Gacy's defense argued that at the time, he was in an uncontrollable state of insanity, pleading not guilty.
Defense attorney Robert Mata countered to the jury that by any standards, Gacy is insane. He sleeps with corpses in a house where bodies have been buried for years. Can that be normal? What kind of a mind is that? The defense will show Gacy is deeply ill.
Loving and caring. I've always looked after my children, even now. No, not as strict as no. A lot of things that my dad did, I refuse to do because I don't believe in hitting children. I don't believe in spoiling a child either. My values are such that if you give enough love to the children,
Of murdering 33 kids, and you say you didn't believe in hitting.
Well, anybody that knows, you see, first of all, you're basing this garbage on on what you've heard of me.
And the prosecutor who put him in jail says Gacy is a ruthless and sadistic killing machine.
He's responsible. He knew exactly what he was doing. He planned it in advance. He carried it out, and he enjoyed it.
And he admitted it. In fact, boasted of it to the police.
However, based on Gacy's detailed confession and site excavation records, such as using lime in the crawl space and impersonating police while luring victims, the prosecution presented evidence showing premeditation, refuting the defense's claims.
In regard to going out in the garage, yes, I know I went to the house, and yes, I know I walked in the garage, and they asked me where the last section of concrete was poured. Okay. I said, there's the last section where the last section of concrete was poured. They are the ones that took the orange can of paint and said, here, put a mark there. So I put an X there.
So the paint was not to identify the place of burial.
No, it never was.
He made more than just an X on the floor.
He sprayed a stick figure with the orange spray can in the garage. Not just a mark, a stick figure showing the orientation of the body. Right underneath that stick figure, exactly where he drew it, pointed in the direction he drew it, was the body of John Butkovich.
On March 13 of that year, after reviewing the physical evidence and confession records, the jury returned a guilty verdict on all charges.
John Wayne Gacy was found guilty today in Chicago of the murder of 33 young men and boys, all of whom he either induced or forced to have sexual relations with him. He buried most of the bodies under his house and got rid of the others elsewhere.
It took the jury of 7 men and 5 women less than 2 hours to find John Wayne Gacy guilty of murdering 33 young men. Gacy was convicted of murdering more people than anyone else in U.S. history. He showed no emotion as the verdict was read.
If you want to charge me with anything, charge me with complicity in 2 of the murders.
Just 2?
That's all I know about. Robert Peace was killed by another individual in my home.
How did he get to your home?
He was transported to the house by another.
How did the other, whoever he was, kill Robert Peace?
I believe he was strangled.
You were there.
Not during the crime, but I was there afterwards, and I watched the removal of the body.
And what happened to the body afterwards?
It was taken to the river and dumped in the river.
Did you help do that?
Yes, I'm in complicity with that. I've always contended. Don't look at me as an innocent babe of the wood. No. I'm not only the victim here. I may be the 34th victim, but there are other victims to this crime, and that is the families, and nobody gives a damn about the families. That one mother that gets on television all the time who thinks I should be given 33 injections, I think she ought to take 33 Valiums and go lay down.
The presiding judge sentenced John Wayne Gacy to death, convicting him of 33 murders. And on May 10, 1994, at Stateville Correctional Center, Illinois, he was executed by lethal injection, bringing an end to the double life of Hugo the Clown that had shocked the local community. According to execution reports and autopsy records, his death was confirmed, but the unidentified remains left beneath his home crawl space and the tragedy of the missing victims' families remained an unresolved, long-standing cold case. 8 of the excavated, unidentified remains remained under unidentified victim numbers for years. On October 12, 2011, the Cook County Sheriff's Office for the long unidentified victims' identification applied advanced forensic DNA technology and launched a reinvestigation. As a result of DNA matching investigation, the forensic team confirmed that the DNA of the remains classified as victim 19 missing at the time matched the buried family. Identified victim 19 as William Bunny in 2011, and in 2017 the remains of victim 24 as Jimmy Hutchinson, a runaway boy, and in 2021 the remains of victim 5 as Francis Alexander, a boy missing in 1976. The respective families received the remains, allowing them to hold funerals and mourn. As of 2026, 3 of the 8 unidentified remains have been identified. Victims 10, 13, 14, 21, and 28 remain unidentified without their names, listed under numbers at the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office, Law Enforcement and the Forensics Institute, observing DNA profiles, dental records, and evidence for retesting with future DNA technology, which will become even more sophisticated. And for the families of the 5 victims known only by numbers, the time of disappearance continues even now.
What do I think of Jeffrey Dahmer? I don't know the man personally, but I'll tell you this, that's a good example as to why insanity doesn't belong in a courtroom. Because if Jeffrey Dahmer doesn't meet the requirements for insanity, then I'd hate like hell to run into the guy that does. Beyond that, I have no comment on Jeffrey Dahmer because I'm not Jeffrey Dahmer. And I would not, whether it's Berkowitz, whether it's Bundy, or any of the others, or Charlie Manson, see. I don't comment about other cases for the simple fact is that I wasn't there. God, I hate that when they put me in the same club with them. I'm just as lovable and jokeable as I was back then. You know, I don't sit around worrying about the death penalty or things like that. No.
How could you not?
If you believe you've lived your life the right way, then you do not have nothing to fear. In my case,
You're not worried about facing God.
no, I'm fairly comfortable with him. I've been at the Catholic services. I'm the server for the priest for the last 10 years. I have no qualms about doing that. I've had confession, I have communion, and I am at peace with myself.
The smile of the clown that made children laugh and the ruthless gaze toward the confined boys coexisted within a single person. A friendly volunteer image trusted by the local community broke down people's guard. And familiarity masked the hidden danger, the deepest darkness of human society, behind a face that anyone encounters, remained as the fact that it can emerge.
Kemper was arraigned this afternoon on charges of killing 6 young women, his mother, and a friend of hers over a period of time from May 7, 1972 to the 21st of this month. All the victims except one, the woman friend of his mother, were dismembered. All the young women, 5 college co-eds and 15-year-old Iko Koo of Berkeley, were last seen hitchhiking.
He apparently, according to what he says, fantasized about doing this for quite a long period of time.
December 18, 1948, Edmund Kemper Roman III was born in Burbank, California, U.S. to his father, WW2 veteran Edmund Kemper Roman II, and mother Cornell Stage, as their second child and only son. During childhood, Kemper grew much faster than his peers, developing a massive physique that dwarfed others from a young age. This rapid physical growth caused others to feel alienation and inexplicable fear, labeling him as a monstrous child in their eyes, which became a factor that isolated him. But Kemper himself, despite his large body, held no authority or control at home, feeling mentally suffocated and repressed, and gradually spent more time alone. His mother, Cornell Stage, was alcohol dependent, repeatedly subjecting her children to extreme mood swings and verbal abuse, and specifically, seeing her son begin to resemble his father, she treated Kemper as a dangerous being, venting her own fear and anger onto him. As his parents filed for official divorce in 1957, the family structure completely collapsed. Kemper tried to leave his mother and rely on his father, but his father reacted coldly, ultimately rejecting and shunning him. The experience of successive rejection by his parents deepened his isolation. Afterward, Kemper had to live in a subservient relationship with his oppressive mother, and after moving to Helena, Montana, following the divorce, his mother's control and abuse intensified further. His mother feared that he might use his massive body to harm his younger sisters, so to separate him from the family, she made him sleep alone in a windowless basement room only a few meters wide. The prolonged period of basement isolation isolated Kemper from the outside world and normal social relations, and it is analyzed that within such a confined environment, he developed distorted hostility toward women and a desire to control others. According to later analysis by forensic psychologists and Kemper's own statements, the sadistic fantasies and desire for control formed in the basement during this period are evaluated as having become a decisive psychological link that led him to choose the car interior as a mobile confined space, an environment where he could easily search for and control his victims. While isolated in the basement, Kemper began to use his high cognitive ability and strong fantasies to start hiding his own behavior, and exhibited stereotyped patterns of animal abuse. He would take his sister's dolls, venting his need for control by decapitating or dismembering them, and would catch small creatures like neighborhood stray cats or livestock, burying them alive only to dig them up again, and engaging in the habit of mutilating their bodies. At age 13, he killed his own cat with a knife and hid the carcass in his bedroom closet, where it was discovered by his mother. Hust Criminal Psychological Research has analyzed Kemper's childhood animal abuse by connecting it to the McDonald trial along with bedwetting and arson. This is a classical hypothesis that such behaviors in childhood can serve as later warning signs associated with violence. In Kemper's case especially, animal abuse was not just simple cruelty, but was analyzed as initial behavior where suppressed anger and desire for control were vented on weaker targets. However, modern criminology does not view these factors as a single cause of serial murder, but interprets them as the result of various psychological and environmental factors.
You were able to appear like an ordinary person, non-threatening to...
I lived as an ordinary person most of my life, even though I was living a parallel and increasingly sick life, other life.
You were involved in the campus because your mother worked there?
Yes. I was also involved in killing co-eds because my mother was associated with college work, college co-eds, women, and had a very strong and violently outspoken position on men for much of my upbringing. My mother was a sick, angry, hungry, and very sad woman. I hated her, but I wanted to love my mother.
In 1963, as conflicts and control from his mother reached a breaking point, Kemper ran away from home and visited his father in California again. However, his father had already remarried and started a new family, and he did not accept Kemper. Ultimately, he was sent to his grandparents' home in Madera County, California. His grandfather, C.B. Stage, was a strict man who ran a dairy farm, and his grandmother, like his mother Cornell, He is known to have shown strong control and a critical attitude toward Kemper. Feeling despair at being rejected by his father again and experiencing extreme isolation and frustration under his grandparents' control, he continued a life again cut off from the world. 1 year later, on August 27, 1964, emotions that had been building up under his grandparents' strict control finally began to manifest in an extreme way. The 15-year-old Edmund Kemper, in the yard of his grandparents' ranch, approached behind his grandmother, Maud Stage, who was coming out of the kitchen, and killed her with his grandfather's hunting rifle. Immediately after, as his grandfather was driving home from ranch work, he killed Simya Stage with a targeted shot. According to his statement, the crime stemmed from a desire to test how my mother would react if I did something she would hate. It was the first instance where his deep anger and distorted feelings toward his mother erupted into violence. Kemper immediately used the home telephone to call the Madera County Sheriff's Office himself, confessing, "I shot my grandmother and grandfather," and was arrested without resistance by arriving police, evaluated with severe mental and antisocial issues. Kemper was sent to the Atascadero State Hospital in California instead of facing a criminal trial. At the time, he was a giant standing 206 cm tall, weighing merely 130 kg. During his stay, Kemper used his intellect and verbal skills to maintain an exemplary record, focusing on building survival strategies within the system rather than internal change. While confined as a violent and immature juvenile offender, he grasped the intent behind the questions from psychiatric staff, developing the ability to act out the image evaluators expected. He dramatically improved his ability to converse with medical staff, successfully constructing a persona of a model inmate who fully controls impulses and feels deep remorse. At the time, hospital staff failed to fully grasp his dangerousness and hidden dark inner self, resulting in a decision for social reintegration that led to tragedy. The skills of mimicking social responses and self-presentation Kemper learned then were later used to evade social scrutiny. The 1960s correctional system prioritized juvenile rehabilitation, focusing on offenders recognizing their wrongdoing, changing, and returning to society. But evaluation systems had limits in distinguishing between a carefully crafted model inmate persona and his true psyche. On December 18, 1969, reaching the age of 21, Kemper was cleared for release based on medical judgment that he was no longer a threat to society. Due to legal procedures, his childhood record of parricide was sealed from public view, preventing risk information from reaching general society. And within the limitations of the protection system then, he returned as a regular citizen with no criminal record restrictions. After his release, Kemper paradoxically returned to the home in Santa Cruz, California, where his mother Carnell, who had isolated and abused him and worked as staff, lived, and reunited with her.
Oh, he was kind of an odd man. He didn't say much. He seemed like kind of a mama's boy. I always was kind of afraid of him, actually. He scared me a lot, and I heard him and his mother argue quite a bit, all the time. He was an average person. He blended in with everybody. I mean, he talked a lot when we had a barbecue down here in the backyard last July, but the only time he didn't talk too much was when, like, if I'd meet him in the garage by myself, or he was coming in and I was going out, or the other way around. All he would say is hi, and that was it. But if you tried to start a conversation with him, it was kind of useless. You know, he never really volunteered anything.
How do you feel now that you found out he was a neighbor?
Scared stiff, because he really was a neighbor. I lived right next door in the next apartment next to him, and it just gives me the creeps. It's kind of an understatement.
Kemper, known to have a high IQ of 145, attempted to enroll in college after returning to society, but apart from his high intellectual ability, he failed to adapt to the academic and social environment, and ultimately experienced failure as opportunities for social advancement and recognition through academics were blocked. Kemper turned to creating a thorough persona of a normal citizen to build a trustworthy image among those around him, while building a reputation as a polite and diligent young man to neighbors. He began to actively reveal his long-held and deep interest in police organizations. His childhood aspiration to become a police officer went beyond mere professional admiration, leading to a craving for an authorized group that symbolizes social power and control. He was able to hide his past due to his sealed criminal record, and based on this, gradually learned how to present himself within society and gain the trust of others. Later, his childhood interest in the police evolved into a complex obsession with the investigative agencies that were meant to monitor him. Between 1970 and 1971, Kemper found work as a road surveyor for the California Highway Department, securing a stable job and regular income, with which he purchased a Ford Galaxy. After night shifts or on his days off, he would drive and roam aimlessly around Santa Cruz and nearby college areas. At the same time, he frequently visited the jury room, a police explosive bar located near the Santa Cruz Police Department, building friendships with active duty officers and detectives. The relationships Kemper formed at the jury room went beyond social activity, becoming a foundation for him to position himself as someone close to the police society he admired. Officers nicknamed the friendly, over 2-meter tall highway worker Big Ed, sharing drinks with him. And through conversations with them, Kemper could closely observe internal police relationships, response tactics, and investigation procedures, along with the organization's atmosphere.
They'd buy me a beer, I'd buy them a beer. Casual relationships, but I was poking around a little bit trying to find some things out. I knew they wouldn't be privy to hot information, but there were some things that were bothering me, like were there any speculations on how they were dying?
Did the cops like you?
Like I said, a friendly nuisance. I got in the way, and it was deliberate. Again, friendly nuisances are dismissed.
How did you get the knowledge to outsmart the police?
Watching television, believe it or not. Joseph Wambaugh, police story. Got some tremendous insights into not just the gimmicks, the actual things, the tidbits that he would pick up from their procedures, but the mechanics behind that, the logic behind it, was I would not allow myself to walk into even a potential trap of behavior. And one of those was talking about those crimes too much. People initiating conversations about that.
He recognized that these relationships acted as a factor that lowered the guard of those around him toward himself, and consequently, the friendly image and police connections he cultivated served as a crucial foundation for gaining the trust of police and others and avoiding suspicion. In May 1972, the method of crime Kemper had formulated in his mind began to be executed in reality for the first time, driving his Ford vehicle. While roaming near Highway 1 by Santa Cruz, he spotted Berkeley students Mary Ann Pess and Anita Lucchesa, who were hitchhiking, and stopped the car. Kemper opened the passenger door, showed his highway department pass, and introduced himself as a reliable young man with a steady job. Although his massive frame could have raised suspicion in those he first met due to his friendly demeanor and professional image that inspired trust, the two students did not perceive him as a dangerous person and ultimately boarded the vehicle without any suspicion. Kemper drove them to a remote hillside, murdered them, loaded their bodies into his car trunk, and moved them to his Santa Cruz bedroom while his mother was away. He mutilated the bodies in the bedroom, recorded the process with a Polaroid camera, and later placed the remains in plastic bags, disposing of them in dense brush in the Santa Cruz Mountains near Loma Prieta. Even after his first human crime, Kemper went back to his daily routine at the highway department uncaught, continuing to drink with detectives at the jury room, where he could closely observe the progress of the missing persons investigation. He experienced that his persona, the social image of a reliable professional he created, and the trust and deception structure built through it were actually working, led to a distorted sense of superiority in deceiving even investigators, and his criminal method of exploiting trust began to evolve into more sophisticated forms thereafter.
Why did you actually kill the girls?
My frustration, my inability to communicate socially, sexually. I wasn't impotent, but emotionally I was impotent. I was scared to death of failing in male-female relationships. I knew absolutely nothing about that whole area. Even if just sitting down and talking with you, I need to be able to really communicate. And ironically enough, that's why I began picking people up. And I'm picking up young women. And I'm going a little bit farther each time. It's a daring kind of a thing.
In early 1972, Kemper began to design a meticulous criminal mechanism to realize his violent fantasies in reality. He conspicuously displayed a UC Santa Cruz parking sticker on his Ford Galaxy, his mobile, crime scene, and private chamber. He exploited the hitchhiking culture prevalent on campus then, using his stable civil service job and a sense of belonging from the parking sticker to entice female students to board his vehicle without suspicion, perfecting his approach. The instinctive threat posed by his massive physique was perfectly masked by the polite, friendly persona he acted out. In May 1972, immediately after he murdered his first victims, Mary Ann Pess and Anita Lucchesa, the authorities' reactions served as the critical trigger accelerating his crimes. Despite the disappearance of the two students, initial investigations were treated as separate cases, and at the time, investigative agencies lacked the intelligence to determine criminal possibilities in-house missing persons cases. The pattern of serial crimes occurring during hitchhiking was also not yet revealed, so the link or possibility of murder between the two cases went unnoticed. As there was almost no investigation pursued from May to September, Kemper became increasingly convinced that his social disguise and his approach were effective in reality. The fact that the possibility of serial crimes did not emerge in initial investigations, and that those around him did not suspect him, developed into a misguided conviction that he could control his crimes, becoming the psychological foundation for moving on to riskier, bolder crimes.
My mother worked at the campus and I had an A sticker on my car and obvious access day or night to the campus. I was picking up some very lovely young women. She judged me not to be that guy. I didn't look like him. It was getting easier to do. I was getting better at it. I was getting less detectable.
Thereafter, Kemper repeatedly scouted for victims using the approach method he had established on September 14, 1972. While patrolling around campus in his vehicle, Kemper approached 15-year-old dance student Aiko, who was hitchhiking to dance class after missing her bus, and politely offered to drive her to her destination. Immediately after locking the doors and turning onto a deserted road, Kemper used his overwhelming size advantage to overpower and strangle the resisting victim. On January 8, 1973, the following year, he picked up 18-year-old Cindy Shaw, who was hitchhiking to attend college classes at Cabrillo College, murdered her, and transported her body home to mutilate it in his mother's bathtub. In particular, he buried the severed skulls in the soil of the garden in his mother's backyard, later stating that he wanted to mock her every day by burying the bodies right under the garden, where she always nagged me. This showed that the violence against his victims was a result of twisted hatred and the desire for control, originating from his mother and projected onto others. The cycle of his crimes grew shorter, and becoming bolder, Kemper committed another crime on February 5 of the same year, targeting 2 victims at once. He first picked up 23-year-old Rosalind Thorpe, who was leading a lecture at UC Santa Cruz. He then spotted Alice Liu, who was hitchhiking on campus, and pulled her over. Seeing Thorpe in the front seat, Liu also climbed in. Kemper stopped his car on the shoulder of an outer highway and murdered both of them in succession. Some of their remains were found at the foot of a cliff days later, but authorities failed to secure decisive physical evidence identifying the culprit, and the investigation showed no significant progress. As consecutive disappearances and murders of female college students occurred, the Santa Cruz police finally expanded their investigation and began an intensive probe around the campus area. However, the most ironic situation during this period was unfolding at the Joy Room, police-only bar outside the investigation headquarters, and authorities continued their investigation without ever realizing it. Serial killer Kemper appeared at his regular bar every night, clinking glasses with the detectives in charge of the investigation, asking, "Is there any progress on the case? Or any new clues?" As he kept the conversation going, continuously tracking the investigation status of the college student disappearances. This was an ironic situation where Kemper maintained a close relationship with investigators and peeked into the flow of the case, while he remained completely excluded from the suspect list. While the investigation hovered around the campus, the conflict inside Kemper with his final target and source of violent impulses, his mother Tarnell Stage, was reaching an irreversible tipping point.
I got the gun in the car, the same one I've been doing it with. I insisted, as gently as I could, I took them where they needed to go, to their college. That was 1 week before I murdered my mother. I said, she's got to die, and I've got to die, or girls like that are going to die. And that's when I decided I'm going to murder my mother. I knew a week before she died I was going to kill her. And what's her closing words? I suppose you want to sit up all night and talk. God, I wish I had.
Even after murdering 6 young women, Kemper's anger did not dissipate. Although the victims were gone, the mother he had hated his entire life remained in the same house. Ultimately, the final remaining target was the mother toward whom his anger had been directed from the start. On April 20, 1973, silence fell over the Santa Cruz home. Kemper waited in silence for the opportunity until his mother, Tarnell Stage, whom he felt had repressed, taunted, and insulted him his whole life, fell fast asleep. Around 1 a.m., Kemper entered the bedroom silently in the dark and murdered his sleeping mother using a hammer and a knife. The subsequent mutilation Kemper committed was the moment his long-suppressed hatred exploded. He severed his mother's head and placed it on the living room table, then cut out her vocal cords, put them in the kitchen disposal, and turned it on. According to court records, this act was his distorted desire for control, expressed in the most brutal form. Wanting to silence that voice that had yelled at me my whole life. After hiding his mother's body in a closet, Kemper remained calm even after the crime. The next day, April 21, he called 59-year-old Sarah Hallett, his mother's best friend and a university administrator, and poorly lied, saying his mother had planned a surprise party and invited her to the house that evening. Sarah Hallett, who arrived at the house without suspicion, was overpowered by Kemper waiting in the hallway and strangled, and her body was dumped in a bedroom closet. The exact reason Kemper murdered Sarah Hallett remains unknown. However, as she was close to his mother and was killed immediately after the crime, investigators raised the possibility that it was an act to prevent the murder of his mother from being discovered. After the disappearance of his mother, the target of his lifelong obsession, Kemper's string of crimes came to an abrupt end, leaving both bodies hidden in his home. Kemper loaded a handgun and ammunition into his mother's car and began fleeing east across state lines. He drove for 2 days straight, crossing Nevada. and reached Pueblo, Colorado, 1,500 kilometers away, even as news reports of the bodies discovered in his Santa Cruz home and the massive investigation began airing on the car radio. The police pursuit had yet to catch up with him on the road. The moment he realized the authorities could not catch him, a distorted sense of superiority from outsmarting law enforcement and the hollowness from having no reason to continue his crime struck him, and the certainty that police would never find him paradoxically led him to stop his flight and choose to end his escape himself. On the night of April 23, inside a public phone booth in Pueblo, Colorado, Kemper picked up the receiver and called the Santa Cruz Sheriff's Office, which he frequented. He identified himself to the officer on duty and calmly confessed to killing his mother, Sarah Hallett, and all the missing young women himself. However, the police, who usually drank with him at the jury room and knew him only as a friendly regular, could not initially accept his confession due to the gap between the Kemper they knew and the truth of him being a serial killer. Frustrated by the police's failure to come arrest him, Kemper contacted the local Pueblo police again a few hours later and demanded to be arrested, giving specific details about the bodies and their locations that only the culprit could know. The next morning at dawn, when officers surrounded the phone booth, he was waiting for the responding officers without any resistance. Arrested on the spot, Kemper was immediately extradited to California, and as forensics teams raided his Santa Cruz home and backyard, evidence including the remains and belongings of the students and crime record photos were surfaced one after another. Due to Kemper's voluntary surrender by contacting the police himself, the investigation into the serial murders that had gripped California in fear for nearly a year finally concluded.
Why did you wind up giving yourself up?
It had to stop. It had to stop. Once my mother was dead, there's almost a cathartic process at that point. I got physically ill right then when she died, and I murdered her. And once she was dead, there was no way I could back out. I had backed down from giving up 1,000 times. You know, I used to get drunk and go sit out in front of the sheriff's department in a parking lot across the street on one of those little concrete parking berms. And I just sit there and say, no, I still can't. The clanging doors, I could still hear them. No, because it'll never open again. You know, so I rationalized that to give up would be insane. To give up would be crazy. I'd be giving away my freedom, and I don't need to. But I look back on that and wish I had earlier when I was saying those things to myself. The people who were later dead wouldn't be. The regret that came later would have not had to be. Those people, not things, those people would still be with their families, with their loved ones. They would have their own families if I had had the courage to make that decision instead of painting myself into the corner.
In October 1973, in the Santa Cruz County Superior Court in California, the main trial for Edmund Kemper began. During the trial, the defense team argued that he was not responsible due to his mental state, citing his childhood abuse and history at Atascadero State Hospital. However, the prosecution proved his crimes were premeditated based on his destruction of evidence and efforts to evade police. Searches of Kemper's Ford Galaxy yielded critical physical evidence, including victims' belongings and traces of remains, revealing the full extent of his crimes in court. Kemper also testified in detail about his crimes from the stand, shocking the jury. When the judge offered him a final statement, he declared, "I have no intention of returning to society, so give me life without parole or the death penalty," expressing his desire to be isolated from society. On November 8, the jury found Kemper guilty on all 8 counts of first-degree murder, and the court sentenced him to consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. After his sentencing, Kemper was incarcerated at the California Medical Facility, a maximum security prison. The murders Kemper confessed to totaled 10 people, including his 2 grandparents, whom he murdered as a boy, 6 young women, his mother, and her friend. Of these, all 8 murders committed after he reached adulthood resulted in convictions. After his imprisonment, Kemper, with his high intelligence and verbal skills, became a notable figure in criminal psychology research. In the late 1970s, when FBI Behavioral Science Unit special agents John Douglas and Robert Resser visited Vacaville Prison to study the psychological traits of serial killers, Kemper was one of the inmates who most actively participated in the interviews. During hundreds of hours of in-depth interviews, he described the fantasies serial killers had before crimes, their psychological state during body mutilation, and his methods for stalking victims and luring them into his vehicle. His detailed psychological testimony served as crucial material for early research into serial killer profiling and law enforcement criminal analysis. In addition, Kemper participated in volunteer work recording audiobooks for the visually impaired, reading and recording including hundreds of literary and technical books in his own voice over decades. Although eligible for parole several times during his incarceration, he remained opposed to returning to society, and to this day, Kemper continues to serve his sentence in a California correctional facility.
Where might you be if you'd never given in to the impulse to murder?
Where might I be? If my parole had been successful, I believe I'd be married, I'd have children, I'd be heading toward my first grandchildren.
The basement cell that once isolated a boy from the world eventually became another cell, a vehicle used to trap others. Under his parents' misguided control, the uncontrollable rage he felt toward his mother was projected into violence that destroyed the lives of innocent people. A man's twisted desire for control, formed through suppressed hatred, ultimately remained as the reality of violence returned upon society.